Hi, welcome to a special edition of the NWI.com Political Roundtable. Today is Monday, November 4th. I'm here with Congressman Pete Visclosky, a Democrat from Indiana, and 1st District, I should add, and Times Assistant Managing Editor Crista Zivanovic. I'm Doug Ross, Editorial Page Editor. Well, we should probably talk about the big issues of the day, and one of the big issues is the dysfunction in Congress. You know, we're at dysfunction junction if you go through the Schoolhouse Rock thing. How do you get it back?
Doug, people are going to have to calm down. We had a vote last month, essentially setting 3 deadlines. One, to try to come up with an overarching figure for domestic spending, and to try to get the day-to-day funding of the government back on track. Next year, again, a decision on the debt ceiling. My hope today, and I would like to see a comprehensive solution, is more modest, and that is that there would be a 2-year agreement between both houses and both parties to come up with a reasonable number as far as what we need for the day-to-day operation of the government. And given the travail and upset that has taken place, not just the last month, but the last couple of years, would hope that those who want to govern will grab that middle ground and say, let us at least take that first modest step in the right direction. And if that's successful, hopefully then build on that, because we still have other larger questions that have to be addressed.
I'm sure you grew up, Crista, with the same all things in moderation, and we haven't seen as many moderates in Congress as there used to be. You know, a lot of them get primaried, meaning they get bumped out in the primary. We saw that happen with Senator Dick Lugar, and this seems to be happening in the Republican Party. Is it happening in the Democratic Party that much, do you see, or how do we get the moderates back?
It is happening in with the Democratic Party, I should say, but somewhat differently, and some of it relates to reapportionment, the monies that are involved, and in many instances nationally, the lack of factual news versus opinion. For the Democrats on reapportionment, those who are moderate tend to be in districts that are much more competitive and can be overwhelmed more easily if there's a lot of money involved, and again, if you have a quality candidate running. So on the Democratic side, you're losing a fair amount of the moderates. I hate labels, but they used to be called blue dogs. I think there's about 8 or 9 left in the traditional sense of the word, and so you are seeing on the political spectrum less moderate Democrats. In the Republican Party, it's happening in a more pronounced fashion through their own primary process. I have a very good friend of mine who I've illustrated before, Mike Simpson. Mike is a former Republican leader of the Idaho Senate, which gives you every indication of his conservative credentials. He's an appropriator. TV ads have been run against Mike in Idaho since last summer for next year's Republican primary, and the attack is he's willing to compromise. And so you're seeing the loss of, if you would, people in the middle in both parties happen for somewhat different reasons, but it has been unhealthy for the institution itself, because everybody's not like each of us. It's different, and it's a much broader world out there, and you're losing that ability to stand in somebody else's shoes too and see someone else's difference of opinion and come to some resolution of it.
Okay. We talked earlier off camera about the committee process and how it doesn't seem to be functioning the way it used to. Can you explain what that means and how you get back to it?
I really think it has contributed to the gridlock you have seen because there is a purpose to have the United States Congress exercise committee oversight of the executive branch, that whole check and balance. To have the committees consider legislation in smaller groups and subcommittees, in the full committee, and to have the Republican and Democratic members, if you would, have at it as far as the amendment process. Can I make this bill better? Beginning in 1995, when Newt Gingrich became Speaker, I think there was almost a sense of the Republican Party couldn't believe this had happened, that they were in a majority. and the leadership took an onward role as far as deciding what legislation would be on the floor and what it would look like. That continued to be the case under Speaker Pelosi and continues to be the case today. I point out to the compromise that was reached on October 1st and point out there were about 5 people that were part of that negotiations. That is unfair to all of the American voters and doesn't lead to the deliberate consideration of legislation, and would hope if we are successful in having an agreement for at least 2 years on a number, is to then let the committees consider them at some length and do some oversight, and to look at it more granularly as opposed to a couple of people in a room coming up with a gross number.
Okay. You're on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. Can you maybe list a couple of examples of why a continuing resolution doesn't let you function the way that you think the committee structure should?
I certainly would. Every year in an institution such as the Department of Defense that spends almost $600 billion, things change, threats change, the need for different training changes. A continuing resolution essentially restricts the Department of Defense and other agencies to do what they did last year, despite the fact that in many instances the various branches come in and say, we would like to do something differently, we have a better idea, or this is an inefficient facility, it should be closed. I have a list that I read on the House floor of failed tests for weapon systems, Inspector General reports where monies were being wasted. With a continuing resolution, those can't be implemented under the legislative process because essentially everyone is just doing what they did last year. It is very unfair to the American taxpayers, and also it does not lead to the best, in this case, defense of our nation.
Okay. One of the things we should probably start talking closer to home. One of the things that you've been very passionate about is bringing the South Shore extension to Northwest Indiana. So how do you bring it about?
Doug, I think because it is imperative to do so, and I do believe local officials, particularly at the county level, our state officials, our city officials, realize we need to make an investment to grow jobs and the economy. I have pointed out repeatedly that the population of Lake County is 9.2% less than it was in 1970. Our median income is 12.9% less than it was in 1970. The average person, if they were living in 1970 versus today, would have been 42% older than they are. The young people, whether they've gone off for training, military service, school, have tended not to come back. We are fewer, we are poor, and we are older, and we need to make an investment, and I do believe expansion of the South Shore and having good regional bus system is part of that key. You look at the vibrancy of the economy in Chicago, its economy is larger than Sweden's. They have 410 miles of mass transit line. On the Indiana side of the border to Michigan City, we have 38. We need to tie ourselves into that economy for those good paying jobs, and given the attractiveness of the communities in Northwest Indiana as far as housing affordability and tax affordability, encourage people that, hey, maybe there's someplace else we could live and still work in Chicago, and then they can bring their money and their talent and energy here. Young people, studies have shown, would rather take transit, would rather ride a bike if they could, than have to get into a car and drive. And it's those young people in particular we want to attract. Some of the debate has been people will leave the northern communities. I regret they have left. There's nobody else to leave. They're not going to get on the South Shore and leave. Some people have said, I'm not going to ride the train. I will never ride the train. But if someone's quality of life is improved, if their property value, because they're close to transit-oriented development, is improved, I have benefited as a resident of Lake County. And the fact is, we are all paying a federal tax today every time we buy gasoline that helps other communities build transit systems. But we can't get those monies back unless we make an investment in ourselves. And I think that is that need to create jobs is taking hold. I have suggested to everyone that it is time to make a decision and to act, and we ought to wrap this debate up by March 31st because we've got to get started on this project.
And can you explain for our readers and citizens, you talked a little bit offline about earlier about how despite the dysfunction at the federal level and federal government, we still can get federal dollars and leverage them, and that we need to do that because without that we can't finance this on our own, and we will not get this growth and economic development.
Right. It was estimated in 2011 that the cost to expand the South Shore to Dyer would be about $440 million. I'm not saying that will be the exact cost. Let us suggest $500 million. That's not inconsequential. Half of it is federal. You're absolutely correct. What I point out is even if we do not return to the regular order of business, which I would deeply regret, we will do what we did last year, despite shutdowns, despite sequestration, despite furloughs. And last year we spent about $11 billion at the federal level on mass transit and development of these systems. So that pot of money is going to continue to be there. The urgency I attach to this is not only the jobs to be created here, but the fact that other communities see the light, so there will be more competition for those federal dollars, all the more reason to get in line first. And that pot is not going to grow under any foreseeable future circumstance. So to the extent costs continue to grow every year, we do nothing. Let's do it now and take advantage of part of that $11 billion that we know are there. I would also say there is no guarantee in the legislative process, and I cannot promise anyone that that match is going to be there. What I can tell everybody is every study, every statistic we have done evidences that we meet every last final federal criteria but one. And that's the non-federal matching source, which would be dollar for dollar. And I would ask your listeners and readers, where else can you invest $1 and the next morning get $1 back? And that's just to build the train. That is absent the jobs, and that's absent the transit-oriented development.
And the enhancements all the way down the line to those communities.
All the way down the line.
Right. Which all you have to do to see what that looks like is to go across the state line and look at the metro lines.
No, you look at that, and some people have suggested, well, some jobs are leaving the loop and they're moving to the northwest side. I said, well, that may be true for the sake of argument. There's rail lines going out there. At some point, maybe they just said, I'm taking my business out there. That's what we need, among other things, to be the true southeast suburb of Chicago. Right. You have great communities. People always complain, well, we're balkanized. We have all. The flip side of that is each community has an identity. You got a gazebo in Highland. You got 119th Street and the lake in Whiting, and you got the lake in Hobart, and you got some great school corporations, and people kind of like that for their families. That's what we offer that in many times you can't get to Chicago if you tie that together. If you tie that together.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you for viewing.